Get out." The words ripped through the room like a thunderclap. Trump's voice, sharp and jagged, echoed against the walls and sent a ripple of shock across the audience. For a moment, no one breathed. Reporters froze with their pens hovering. Mid-air, cameras snapped in rapid bursts, desperate to capture the explosion that had just shattered the air. It was the kind of moment that felt unreal, the kind of outburst that demanded you replay it in your head just to believe it actually happened. Across the stage, Barack Obama did not flinch, didn't rise to meet the roar with a roar of his own. He didn't shift in his seat or break his posture. He simply fixed his eyes on Trump, steady, calm, unblinking. Where Trump's words were meant to shake, Obama's silence steadied. His composure itself became a response. And the contrast only made Trump's shout echo louder in the silence that followed. The audience was caught between disbelief and anticipation. They leaned forward, waiting for the collision, waiting for the next strike in this political theater turned gladiator match. Few gasps escaped from the crowd. Whispers flickered like sparks. Did he really just say that? Is he serious? The tension was thick enough to feel. Pressing against every chest in the room, Trump's face was tight with the performance of dominance. His body leaning forward, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. He wanted a reaction. He wanted chaos, a clash that he could feed on, but Obama didn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, he let the moment hang in the air like a weight that only one man seemed to feel. It was a silence more powerful than any shout. Silence that made Trump's rage look smaller, almost desperate. Somewhere in the back, camera shutter clicked louder than it should have, and the audience shifted again, restless, caught in the suspense of what they knew had to come next. Trump had fired his shot, the loudest weapon in his arsenal. Volume. But the nation was waiting aching to see how Obama would answer, and when he finally did, it wouldn't just be a reply to Trump. It would be a statement to America itself, but no one could have predicted what came next. Asterisk, this was never just about a single insult hurled across a stage. It was never only about Donald Trump raising his voice and Barack Obama refusing to flinch. What unfolded in that instant carried the weight of two very different visions of America, colliding before a captive audience. On one side stood a man who thrived on spectacle, who believed that dominance came from shouting the loudest, forcing submission through raw intimidation. On the other side sat a leader who had built his career on patience, intellect, and an unshakable belief that dignity was stronger than rage. The clash mattered because it mirrored the very divide that has carved through American politics for years. Trump embodied brash confrontation, a style built not on persuasion, but on provocation. He treated silence as weakness and volume as power. His followers adored this brashness, seeing it as proof of strength, as the unapologetic voice of someone unafraid to bulldoze opponents. Yet for just as many Americans, that same brashness felt like chaos, like a betrayal of the steady hand they longed for in a leader. Obama, by contrast, had always chosen a different path. He led not with raw aggression, but with the quiet assurance that comes from discipline and perspective. Where Trump's power came from, the fist slammed on the table. Obama's power came from the pause between words, the subtle calm that forced others to lean in and listen. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to demand. His authority came from something far rarer in modern politics: composure under fire. That night, those two forces stood in perfect opposition. It was decency against chaos, leadership against arrogance. The room wasn't just witnessing an argument, it was watching a living, breathing symbol of America's crossroads. The air was electric with more than anticipation. It was charged with the question, which vision would prevail? The cameras knew. They kept cutting from Trump's flushed face, jaw tight with impatience, to Obama's steady gaze, eyes locked but calm. The networks would replay those frames again and again, dissecting them like evidence in a trial. But in the moment, the drama was raw and real. People in the audience shifted in their seats as if they could feel history being written in front of them. This wasn't just political theater. It was something deeper. It was about what kind of country America wanted to be. Did strength mean shouting down your opponent? Or did strength mean withstanding the storm without being moved? Stakes were more than personal, were national, cultural, even generational. And as seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, every eye remained fixed on Obama. Trump had made his move, loud and reckless, a thunderbolt meant to rattle. But thunder alone cannot carry the storm. What mattered was the lightning strike. That followed, the flash that illuminated the entire landscape. The suspense was unbearable. Viewers across the nation would later describe how they felt their hearts pounding, waiting for Obama's reply. People leaned forward in their living rooms, phones buzzing as texts flew. "Are you watching this? Did you see what he just said?" Everyone knew a response was coming. What no one knew was how powerful it would be. Because when Obama finally spoke, it wasn't just a reply to a man yelling on a stage. It was a message that would cut deeper than anyone expected. And when Obama finally replied, the entire room and the entire nation was left speechless. Donald Trump had built an empire not just on real estate, but on spectacle. For decades, his brand was his weapon, and that brand thrived on confrontation. To his admirers, he was the man who never backed down, the billionaire who swaggered into any room with the confidence of someone who believed he owned it. To his critics, he was something else entirely, a man addicted to attention, incapable of letting a slight pass without retaliation, a showman who mistook volume for vision. His history of insults was long and deliberate. Politicians, celebrities few escaped his tongue. He coined nicknames designed to stick like glue: Crooked Hillary, Little Marco, Sleepy Joe. Each jab was less about wit and more about dominance, reducing complex opponents into caricatures that fit neatly into his rallies and headlines. He didn't argue ideas so much as attack identities. And for his base, it worked. They cheered. They repeated the lines until they became part of the political bloodstream. But this strategy carried a darker undertone. Trump's brashness was not born of strength, but of insecurity. Every insult was a shield, every outburst a deflection. Those who had worked close to him often remarked that beneath the bravado lay a constant need for validation. His dominance was a performance loud, relentless, exhausting, and it demanded an audience. Without the cheers, without the gasps, without the cameras, the show lost its power. Clashes with the media revealed the same pattern. He turned press conferences into battlegrounds, berating reporters with personal insults whenever questions cut too close. "You are fake news," he barked at CNN. "A nasty woman." He sneered at Hillary Clinton during a debate. He wielded humiliation like a hammer, hoping each blow would leave opponents rattled, less sure of themselves. It was less about answers and more about asserting control. The louder he shouted, the more he convinced his supporters that volume itself was truth. Even other presidents weren't immune. Trump questioned the legitimacy of George W. Bush's decisions, mocked Jimmy Carter, and most infamously, launched years of attacks on Barack Obama, long before the night he screamed, "Get out." Trump had made Obama a central target of his antagonism. He promoted the baseless birther conspiracy, fueling doubts about Obama's birthplace with no evidence, but with plenty of venom. For Trump, it wasn't about facts. It was about planting seeds of doubt, undermining dignity with derision. This pattern defined him, the constant need to challenge, belittle, and overshadow. It was a hunger for dominance that could never be fully satisfied. He treated politics like a boardroom fight, zero-sum game where the only goal was to win, no matter the cost to truth, civility, the nation's sense of unity. And yet within that hunger lay a paradox. It's the very aggression that thrilled his supporters often revealed cracks in the armor. The more he barked, the more obvious it became that silence unsettled him. When opponents refused to take the bait, when they did not match his volume with volume, his confidence wavered. He thrived on chaos, but without chaos, his performance looked hollow, almost desperate. That was the irony that hung in the air on the night he shouted at Obama. Trump believed that raising his voice, commanding the stage, would show dominance. He believed the sheer force of his outburst would reduce his rival to a spectator, just another victim of his bombast. But history had shown time and again, Obama was not like other opponents. He would not match insult with insult. He would not be dragged into the mud, and in that contrast, Trump's greatest weakness was exposed. By trying to humiliate Obama, he would humiliate himself. His outburst, meant to display control, only revealed insecurity. His demand that Obama get out wasn't the command of a leader, but the tantrum of a man unsettled by composure. It was the culmination of years of behavior, years of insults and bluster. It all crashing into a single moment where the facade cracked. Because against Obama's steady gaze, Trump's roar sounded less like strength and more like desperation. The audience didn't just hear two men that night. They saw two Americas colliding, one of arrogance and bluster, and one of calm resilience. And the more Trump shouted, the clearer that divide became. But what they didn't yet realize was that Obama's reply would not only define the moment, it would forever change how this confrontation was remembered. Barack Obama's story did not begin in the marbled halls of Washington or the spotlight of a national stage. It began in places far removed from power-humble, ordinary corners of life that shaped him into a man who would later embody something extraordinary. Born to a Kenyan father and an American mother, Obama's childhood was marked not by privilege, but by questions of identity, belonging, and resilience. He grew up navigating two worlds, never fully of one, and it was in that in-between space that he learned the value of listening before speaking, of patience before judgment, of dignity in the face of doubt. In his earliest years, he knew struggle. He knew what it meant to live without certainty, to watch his mother work tirelessly, to see the sacrifices of a family that wanted nothing more than opportunity. Those experiences didn't harden him, they deepened him. They planted the belief that greatness wasn't about shouting over others, but about lifting people up, about finding strength in unity rather than division. As a young man, he turned that belief into action. Before he was a senator, before he was a president, he was a community organizer on the south side of Chicago. He walked neighborhoods scarred by unemployment, abandoned factories, and broken promises. He sat in living rooms with families who felt forgotten, listened to their struggles, and worked with them to build something better. It wasn't glamorous work, or no cameras, no cheering crowds. But it was there that Obama honed the philosophy that would define him. True leadership is not about demanding attention, but about giving people a reason to believe in themselves. Those years taught him how to absorb frustration without crumbling, how to face cynicism with perseverance. He learned that change was slow, that progress was fragile, and that dignity in the face of adversity could inspire more than any shouted slogan. His calm wasn't weakness, it was discipline forged in struggle. When he rose to the national stage, he carried those lessons with him. His 2004 Democratic National Convention speech became a defining moment, not because he shouted, but because he spoke with clarity and conviction about unity. He declared, "There's not a liberal America. In a conservative America, there's the United States of America." That line resonated not because it was loud, but because it was true, because it spoke to something deeper than politics, the yearning for connection in a divided land. Obama's path to the presidency was itself a battle against doubt and dismissal. Many said America was not ready for a black president, that the barriers were too high, the divisions too deep. But he persevered. He faced a media that scrutinized his every word, opponents who mocked his very name, a nation that often questioned his belonging. Yet each time he responded not with anger, but with poise. He smiled where others sneered, explained where others shouted. He lifted his head when others tried to drag him low. That resilience became his armor. It wasn't that he never felt the sting of insult or the weight of opposition. It was that he refused to let those things define him. He chose the long view. He chose patience over provocation, trust over fear. His presidency was far from easy, marked by crises, obstruction, and relentless criticism, but through it all, he carried himself with the steadiness of someone who knew that dignity was its own form of power, and it was that steadiness, that calm resilience, that made him so different from Donald Trump. Where Trump saw leadership as dominance, Obama saw it as stewardship. Where Trump thrived on spectacle, Obama thrived on substance. Where Trump raised his voice to be heard, Obama lowered his to make others listen. This difference wasn't abstract, it was personal, lived, felt. For millions of immigrants, minorities, and young people watching him rise, Obama wasn't just a politician. He was proof that the American dream, battered though it was, still lived. His story validated theirs. His presence on the stage told them, "You belong here." 2. So when Trump shouted at Obama to get out, it wasn't just one man yelling at another. It was the embodiment of a long history of voices telling people who looked like Obama, people who shared his story, that they didn't belong. It was the echo of every door slammed shut, every sneer of doubt, every reminder that the system wasn't built for them. But Obama had faced those echoes before. He had heard them in childhood whispers, in campaign doubts, in the venom of political attacks. And every time, he had met them with the same unshakable calm, because he knew something Trump did not. True belonging cannot be shouted down, and it was that same calm resilience that he carried into this moment. The moment Trump shouted at him, the moment stretched into something heavier than silence. Trump had thrown down his challenge with the force of a man used to bulldozing opponents, but the response he expected didn't come. Instead, Obama sat still, his gaze steady, his lips pressed into the faintest trace of a smile. That composure rattled Trump, though he would never admit it. He leaned forward again, searching for the crack he was certain had to be there. "Don't just sit there," Trump barked, voice rising, hands slicing the air as if he could physically cut through Obama's calm. "You failed. Admit it. Everyone knows it. Everyone." His words, sharp and loud, ricocheted across the room, filling the space with the familiar rhythm of his rallies and insults disguised as arguments. Gears dressed up as truth. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of expression. On one side of the split screen, Trump, face flushed, mouth curling into sneers, words tumbling over one another in a rush to dominate. On the other, Obama, shoulders squared, chin lifted, watching with a patience that seemed to grow more powerful. With each interruption, contrast was striking, almost theatrical. The audience shifted uncomfortably. They weren't sure whether to cheer, to gasp, or to brace for something worse. A woman in the second row clasped her hands together tightly. A man near the back shook his head in disbelief. Whispers moved through the crowd like static. Why is he yelling? Why won't Obama say something? The tension was almost unbearable, like the long pause before lightning splits the sky. Trump pressed harder, sensing the unease. "You don't belong here. You've had your chance, and you blew it. Admit it." His voice cracked at the edges, not with weakness, but with the sheer effort of volume. He was a man trying to drown out not just his opponent, but the stillness itself, because that stillness exposed him. Every second Obama refused to flinch made Trump's shouting look less like strength and more like desperation. Still, Obama let him talk. He didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't raise his voice in protest. He just watched. Calm as stone, the same composure that had carried him through crises, through slanders, through the weight of history itself. In that calm, the audience began to sense a reversal. The louder Trump became, the smaller he looked. The quieter Obama remained, the larger his presence grew. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras continued to click, and producers whispered into headsets, sensing the drama unfolding live. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a test of character, a test of who could hold the room. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the room was slipping out of Trump's grasp. The air thickened with conflict, but also with anticipation. Everyone knew something was coming. You could feel it, the way animals sense the storm before the clouds break. The showman was burning through his lines, each one louder and harsher than the last. But the other man, the quiet one, had yet to make his move. It was a showdown of noise versus silence. A contest between the man who believed power meant drowning out every voice but his own, and the man who believed true power meant waiting, holding, and choosing the exact moment to speak. And as Trump's voice cracked again, echoing into the restless crowd, the suspense reached its peak. Right. Because everyone knew, when Obama finally opened his mouth, it would not just be an answer. It would be something that shifted the entire balance of the room. The only question left was how. Asterisk at last. The silence broke. Obama leaned forward slightly. Not with aggression, but with the quiet confidence of a man who knew the weight of his words would land heavier than any shout. The room seemed to shift as he opened his mouth. Even the cameras hesitated in there. Mechanical clicks, as though bracing themselves for what was about to be captured. Are you finished? His voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. The effect was anything but soft. It cut through Trump's noise with surgical precision, slicing away the bluster until only the raw imbalance of the exchange remained.
The audience
Gasped. Trump blinked, thrown off by the simplicity of the question. It was not a counterattack of fury, but of composure, and that was its power. Obama let the pause stretch. He glanced across the room, taking in the faces, the reporters, the audience, the millions watching from their living rooms. He gave them all a moment to breathe, to feel the silence that followed his words. Trump shifted in his chair, muttering something under his breath, but no one was listening anymore. The center of gravity had changed. Then Obama continued, his cadence deliberate. Every syllable chosen with the care of a man who knew his voice carried further than the walls of that room. You keep telling people to get out, he said, his tone steady, unwavering. But the truth is, this country has always been about letting people in. My story, the story of so many Americans. It exists because someone before me was allowed in, allowed a chance, allowed dignity. The line hung in the air like a challenge to every insult Trump had ever hurled, every wall he had ever promised to build. The audience went silent again, not out of fear, but out of awe. It was the silence of recognition, of people realizing they were watching history being written in real time. Obama paused once more, letting the truth of his words linger. His eyes fixed on Trump, but his message reached far beyond the stage. You can shout, you can jeer, you can try to silence me, but the louder you yell, the more you remind people of what you're afraid of, a future you can't control, a future that doesn't belong to one man or one group or one color, a future that belongs to all of us. Gasps again. A murmur rolled through the crowd like the rumble before applause. Trump's face tightened, his mouth working, but no words came quickly enough. He had built his brand on sharp comebacks, on nicknames and jabs that left opponents stumbling. But this wasn't the schoolyard. This was something different, something heavier. Obama's voice dropped lower, quieter, as if speaking directly into the conscience of the nation. You told me to get out, but I am here because the American people put me here. And they put me here because they believed in something bigger than fear. The pause after that line was electric. Reporters froze mid-scribble. The audience held its collective breath. And then, slowly at first, the sound of hands clapping cut through the silence. A single pair, then another, until the room erupted in applause so thunderous it rattled the cameras on their tripods. Trump tried to interject, leaning toward his microphone. Wrong. Totally wrong. You're a failure. But his words drowned beneath the surge of voices, the applause, the cheers. For once, his volume was not enough. The showman's stage had been stolen, not by shouting, but by something far more devastating. Dignity. Obama lifted his hand gently, and the crowd quieted. He had their full attention now, and he knew it. This moment isn't about me, he said. It's about us. It's about whether we define strength as the ability to tear others down or the courage to lift people up. And I'll tell you, this history has always belonged to the people who build, not the people who break. There it was, the line that reframed the entire clash. In a single sentence, Obama had transformed the confrontation from a petty exchange into a moral reckoning. Trump was no longer the center of the drama. He was the foil, the background noise to a larger truth. The audience knew it. They rose too. Their feet, applause swelling once again. On social media, hashtags began forming in real time. Hashtag history belongs to builders. Hashtag Obama mic drop. Clips of his words would be replayed, shared, dissected, and celebrated across every platform within minutes. Trump, meanwhile, sat back in his chair, visibly rattled. His hands gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white. His mouth opened and closed, searching for the insult that could reclaim the moment, but nothing came. Every attempt at interruption fell flat, swallowed by the momentum Obama had seized. For the first time, his voice seemed small. Obama, composed as ever, didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded, as though acknowledging not his own victory, but the truth itself. He spoke once more, softly, almost as if closing a sermon. We don't move forward by telling people to leave. We move forward by telling them they belong. That's what America is. That's what America will always be. The applause returned, louder than before, echoing through the hall. It wasn't just the sound of approval, it was the sound of release. Of people who had been holding their breath under the weight of Trump's noise, finally exhaling into something hopeful. In that instant, the roles had reversed completely. Trump, the man who had built his power on spectacle, had become the spectator. And Obama, the man told to get out, had reminded everyone why he was still in. Why his voice still carried, why his presence still mattered. The cameras captured it all, the stillness of Trump. The standing ovation for Obama, the stunned expressions of those who knew they had witnessed a moment destined for history books. Obama had spoken only a few sentences. But they had been enough. Enough to silence the shouting, enough to shift the narrative, enough to leave America, quite literally, speechless. And as the cheers rolled on, one truth became undeniable. This wasn't just a reply. It was a mic drop heard across the nation. But the impact of Obama's words wouldn't end in that room. They were already beginning to ripple outward, faster than anyone could imagine. Because what happened next would prove this was more than a moment. The moment the debate ended, the echo of Obama's words traveled faster than any motorcade. Within minutes, phones across the country lit up. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform burst alive with clips of the exchange. Ah! The hashtags materialized. Like sparks catching dry grass, each one raced up the trending charts, pulling millions into the conversation. Memes appeared almost instantly. One showed Trump screaming into a megaphone, while Obama stood serene, a speech bubble over his head. Reading, "Are you finished?" Another froze the moment Obama leaned forward, captioned simply, "This is leadership." The internet did what it always does, magnified, exaggerated, and immortalized the moment, but underneath the humor lay something heavier. People weren't just laughing, they were nodding, sharing, rallying around the feeling that they had just witnessed a glimpse of the America they wanted to believe in. Commentators scrambled to keep up. On cable news, split screens lit up with analysts replaying the clip in slow motion, dissecting every pause, every stare, every tremor in Trump's voice. This wasn't just a reply, one pundit said breathlessly. It was a reminder that composure can be more devastating than volume. On late-night shows, hosts opened their monologues with the clip, milking the awkward silence that followed Trump's outburst before replaying Obama's calm, counterstrike to cheers and applause from their studio audiences. Celebrities added fuel to the fire. Singers, actors, athletes' voices with millions of followers retweeted the clip, adding their own commentary. "This is why I voted for him," one pop star wrote. "That's grace under fire." Basketball icon posted a single word: legend. The effect was immediate and exponential. The cultural echo chamber made sure that even those who hadn't watched the debate live could not escape the fallout. Politicians, too, weighed in. Progressive leaders praised Obama's words as a rallying cry for dignity and inclusivity. "This is what America should sound like," one congresswoman tweeted. Even some conservatives, weary of Trump's theatrics, admitted quietly, carefully, that Obama's line had landed with a gravity they couldn't ignore. For Trump loyalists, the task was harder. They tried to reframe the moment as a setup, a media trick, but the footage was undeniable. The more they spun, the more the clip spread. It's untouched, raw, powerful. On Facebook, immigrant families shared the video with personal captions, "He spoke for us." College students posted reaction videos, tears in their eyes, explaining how Obama's words reminded them of their parents' sacrifices. Activists saw in it a new rallying point, a reminder that dignity could cut through division. And for those who had grown tired, exhausted by the endless noise of politics, it felt like a reset button, a reminder that words, when chosen with care, could still matter. The ripple effect stretched beyond America's borders. International. Headlines carried the story. Obama silences Trump with one line. A debate turned into a defining moment. In cafes in Paris, in markets in Nairobi, in classrooms in Tokyo, people replayed the clip. It wasn't just about American politics anymore. It was about a universal hunger for leaders who could wield calm as power. Meanwhile, inside Trump's camp, the reaction was chaos. Advisors huddled to strategize damage control, spinning narratives about unfair moderation and biased coverage. But every attempt was undercut by the raw footage looping endlessly across the internet. They couldn't erase the sound of Obama's voice, the sight of the audience rising to its feet, the look of Trump's silence. And yet, the most profound impact wasn't measured in trends or headlines. It was in the quiet reflections happening. Across living rooms and break rooms, kitchens and classrooms, parents turned to their children and said, "That's how you stand up to a bully." Teachers replayed the clip in civics lessons, pointing to Obama's composure as a model of leadership. For a nation weary of shouting, it felt like a permission slip to believe in decency again. This wasn't just a reply. One commentator said the next morning on national television, it was a message. A reminder that America is at its best not when it screams, but when it speaks with clarity and conviction. And that message lingered. It threaded its way into conversations, campaign speeches, and the national psyche. For many, it felt like a turning point, a single evening that exposed the futility of noise and elevated the power of calm truth. But as powerful as the moment was, it was clear this was only the beginning, because the world would not forget. Obama's words that day, the question was, what would they inspire next? Asterisk in the hours after the clash, as the clip replayed on every screen in America. People began to realize that what they had witnessed was more than just a political exchange. It was a lesson in human dignity, wrapped in a single moment of composure. Obama's words carried weight not because they were loud, but because they were deliberate. Not because they belittled, but because they elevated. The contrast could not have been sharper. On one side, rage, bluster, and the endless need to dominate. On the other, stillness, patience, and the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. It was a showdown that distilled two visions of America, one where arrogance rules the stage, and another where dignity holds the floor. For many, the lesson hit home. Parents shared the video with their children, pointing out the difference between shouting and leading. "This one," mother said to her son, "is how you face someone trying to tear you down. Not by lowering yourself to their level, but by standing taller without raising your voice." In offices, workers replayed the clip at lunch breaks, nodding silently at the idea that strength doesn't always announce itself. It reveals itself when tested. Obama's calm reply reminded the nation that true power is not in decibels, but in direction. It is not the noise of the moment, but the vision that lasts beyond it. Leaders who scream may capture headlines for a day. Leaders who inspire shape generations. And in that instant, it became clear why so many across the world had once looked to him as a symbol of steady leadership. The moral stretched far beyond politics. This wasn't just about Trump and Obama. It was about every student facing a bully, every worker confronting an unfair boss, every immigrant fighting for their place in a country that sometimes forgets its own promise. The message was universal. Dignity is the armor no insult can pierce, and calm is the weapon no fury can match. And for Americans watching, especially those who had grown tired of the daily chaos of political life, the moment felt like a reclamation. It was a reminder of what Americanness could mean. Not bluster, not division, but resilience, composure, and a belief that integrity is the highest form of strength. The immigrant father watching in his living room, the young activist scrolling on her phone, the veteran shaking his head with quiet pride, they all understood the same truth. This wasn't about one man winning an exchange. It was about an idea. That character, not volume, defines leadership as commentators tried to spin it into strategy and sound bites. Ordinary people felt something simpler. Hope. Hope that amid the noise there are still voices capable of cutting through, not with anger, but with clarity. Hope that America, at its best, still knows how to honor grace over grievance, in the end. Obama's words became more than a clapback. They became a creed. They told every viewer, you do not have to shout to be heard. You do not have to humiliate. To lead, you do not have to dominate to win. True power is in restraint, in the courage to remain steady when provoked, in the strength to speak with purpose rather than rage. And that is why, long after the applause faded and the hashtag slowed, the lesson remained. Because America didn't just hear a reply that night, America remembered something about itself, that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the truest, and that dignity will always outlast arrogance. But even as the country reflected on the moral clarity of the moment, another question stirred. Beneath the surface, would this lesson echo forward into action, or would it fade into memory? That answer, like the moment itself, was left in the hands of the people. Asterisk. Trump yelled, tried to dominate the moment with sheer force of volume. But in the end, it wasn't the shout that echoed across America, it was the calm, steady response that silenced the nation. Obama's reply reminded us all that dignity speaks louder than rage, and composure carries further than chaos ever could. What we witnessed wasn't just a clash between two men, it was a mirror held up to America itself. Will we choose the path of arrogance and division, or will we lean into the strength of patience, integrity, and unity? This moment gave us a glimpse of what true leadership looks like, not in the roar of a command, but in the unshakable confidence of truth. And here's the deeper truth, that power doesn't belong to those who yell the loudest. It belongs to those who refuse to be shaken, who stay grounded in their values, who answer hatred not with more hatred, but with clarity. That's the America worth fighting for, the America worth sharing with the next generation. So if this story resonated with you, if you believe in lifting up dignity over arrogance, I invite you to be part of this movement. Subscribe to the SE channel. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that strength doesn't always shout, it stands tall. Add your voice in the comments, because every voice of hope adds to the chorus that drowns out division. This was more than a moment. It was a message, Trump yelled, but Obama's calm response left America speechless, and it reminded us that the future belongs to those who lead with grace, not rage. And now it's on us to carry that lesson forward.